The continued expansion of RSF activities in the northern part of the area, including illegal checkpoints and arbitrary detention of local civilian administrators, undermine the very framework agreed in the 2011 RBA agreement. Equally concerning is the increase in unauthorized operation by SSPDF in the southern area. Such activities, along with the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, further aggravate the already dire humanitarian situation for civilians. At the same time, we welcome the local peace initiatives, including Dinka's Peace Accord in April, and hope that such efforts can be further strengthened with the support of UNISPA. Second, safeguarding the civilian in RBA is inseparable from the safeguarding UNISPA's ability to fully operate. We recall the Council's press statement that was made after the February incident where RSF seized UNISPA's fuel trucks. It is deeply regretful and unacceptable that none of the seized fuel trucks have been returned to the mission to this date. We likewise condemned the repetition of attacks against UNISPA, including those targeting the mission's military vehicles and posts in June and July, and severe restrictions on its movement due to the illegal checkpoints. All parties in RBA must fully respect the status of forces agreement and take every measure necessary to ensure the safety and security of UNISPA's personnel. Third, peacekeeping alone cannot deliver a final settlement. What RBA needs now is renewed political momentum, with both Sudan and South Sudan re-engaging in the process they themselves committed to. We urge both sides to reconvene the meetings of the Joint Political and Security Mechanism and the RBA Joint Oversight Committee with UNISPA support. Given rising criminality and absence of rule of law, fueling inter-communal violence in places like Amiet Market, deploying more police units is essential. We therefore call for the establishment of the RBA Police Service and the issuance of all pending visas for the police officers. Furthermore, to sustain UNISPA's support for joint border verification and monitoring mechanism, it is critical to create conducive conditions for the operation of the mechanism in Kadugli. Mr. President, in the 2011 agreements, the parties, I quote, reiterate their commitment to resolve peacefully the final status of RBA, end of quote. 14 years later, the promise remains, but progress has been absent. We believe our task is not to rewrite that commitment, but to ensure its implementation. And in that journey, UNICEF remains as an essential partner on the ground. The Republic of Korea will therefore continue to support UNISPA's. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
President, congratulations to Sierra Leone as it takes up its presidency of the Security Council. We wish you every success. We're grateful to ASG for Africa, Ms. Martha Poby, and the Special Envoy of the SG for the Horn of Africa, Mr. Guang Kong, for their briefings. We welcome the participation of representatives of Sudan and South Sudan in today's meeting. The momentum of settlement in Abyei since the Security Council extended the mandate of the Interim Security Force in the area back in November 2024 remains scant. The protracted conflict in Sudan on the one hand and the stalled political process in South Sudan on the other are preventing the parties from properly getting down to work on determining the final status of this territory. And yet both states are confronting a financial resource deficit, humanitarian issues. They're being subjected to political blackmail and external interference, including with the deployment of illegitimate unilateral measures. This is pulling them ever further away from the start of substantive negotiations on ABA. Under these circumstances, there's hardly appetite for the Security Council to compel the parties to expedite negotiations on the border, nor for reviving the bilateral cooperation mechanism. It's important to give the Sudanese and the South Sudanese room for maneuver. That is, to demonstrate that the UN stands ready to continue closely monitoring the situation in ABA until the requisite conditions for dialogue between the two capitals are ripe. Pressuring the parties could have a negative impact on the security situation and on the activities of the UN personnel there. We must heed the lessons of the past and do our utmost to avoid taking steps that could ratchet up violence in ABA. We noticed the objective difficulties that the joint border verification and monitoring mechanism is encountering. Now, there is an acute question of how to supply the mechanism's team sites. We are counting on the Sudanese government to pay particular attention to sustaining the activities of the mechanism, with due regard for the difficult security situation in some of the country's southern regions, of course. A new threat to security in ABA is the fact that elements linked to the rebel RSF forces which have appeared in the region. In the absence of deterrence, i.e. factors that could stop them from illegally entering the sector, the South Sudanese army is compelled, on a temporary basis and solely for the purpose of maintaining stability and security, is compelled to deploy its divisions there. We stand convinced that Juba is fully cognizant of the fact that as the situation stabilizes, it will have to engage constructively on the issue of ABA's demilitarized status. The humanitarian situation in the area is complex, but on the whole, it's manageable. The input of peacekeepers is significant, as well as that of UN humanitarian entities and their partners. We're of the view that maintaining a blue helmet presence in the region remains relevant. We believe that the UNESCO configuration in the immediate future will factor in the presence of both a military and a police contingent. It's worth noting that modifying the proportions of these components to increase the civilian and law enforcement component is, in our view, premature. There are concerns that the security of the latter will be much harder to ensure. We're convinced that given the ongoing unresolved status of ABA and general tensions in Sudan and South Sudan, we should abstain from making any sudden moves aimed at reconfiguring the mission's activities or reducing its footprint on the ground. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Council and assure you of our full support and cooperation. We also deeply appreciate the Russian presidency, which was conducted in a smooth and professional manner last month. I thank the Secretary General for his latest report on ABA and ASG Martha Pobi for the valuable briefing. We welcome the Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, Mr. Guang Song, to his new role, and also thank him for his briefing and wish him all the very best. Pakistan commends all UNISFA personnel for their dedication to duty under difficult circumstances. 600 Pakistani troops deployed in UNISFA continue to uphold the UN flag with professionalism and courage, providing vital protection to civilians and sustaining community dialogue despite the operational, financial, and logistical challenges. Mr. President, the situation in ABA remains fragile. The ongoing conflict in Sudan continues to spill across borders, aggravating insecurity, humanitarian suffering, and arms proliferation. South Sudan's internal challenges have further complicated the situation. It is not surprising, therefore, that there has been no progress on the final status of ABA or on border demarcation. Pakistan joins others in urging both Sudan and South Sudan to re-energize and re-engage in meaningful dialogue, as this remains the only sustainable pathway towards resolving this long-standing issue. Pakistan reaffirms that the 20 June 2011 agreement must be fully respected. Abyei must remain a demilitarized and weapons-free zone. The continued presence of South Sudanese security forces in southern Abyei violates the agreement and undermines UNISFA's mandate. The increased presence of rapid support forces in Sector North has further destabilized the situation. The reporting period saw 127 security incidents with 34 fatalities. We are deeply alarmed by RSF checkpoints, the July attack on the Joint Protection Committee station, and the continued proliferation of small arms. We call for the withdrawal of all unauthorized armed elements, unimpeded freedom of movement for UNISFA, and the immediate return of UN property. The 8 United Nations fuel trucks seized by Rapid Support Forces on 28 February 25 must be returned to UNISFA without delay, and RSF should be held accountable for attacks on UNISFA personnel. Mr. President, at the same time, we recognize positive progress at the community level. Relations between the Ngok Dinka and Miseria have continued to improve, aided by UNISFA's facilitation of pre- and post-migration conferences and peace dialogues. These are modest yet meaningful gains that deserve full support. The Pakistani contingent has been deeply involved in these community engagements. The international community should sustain these reconciliation and livelihood programs through predictable funding for the joint program for Abyei, which remains central to peacebuilding and resilience. We remain concerned regarding the mission's financial situation. While $309 million was appropriated for the financial year 25-26, unpaid assessed contributions already exceed $138 million, with overall peacekeeping arrears nearing $4 billion. We encourage all member states to pay their contributions in full and on time. The Security Council bears primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, a duty that lies at the very heart of the Charter. UN peacekeeping is one of the Council's most visible and effective tools for fulfilling that mandate. The Council cannot shy away from its primary responsibility, citing financial crisis. Pakistan stresses that UNISFA's mandate renewal, currently under negotiations, should be smooth. Given the situations in Sudan and South Sudan, our expectations should be based on ground realities. At the same time, we must also realize that in the absence of UNISFA, the risks are stark. A rapid escalation of intercommunal violence, accelerated arms proliferation, collapse of migration arrangements and security, a sharp deterioration in humanitarian access, and expanding cross-border instability that would outpace any political track. Pakistan echoes the call to strengthen support for UNISFA so that it can effectively deliver on its mandate. This includes deploying the remaining UN POL officers and formed police units authorized by the Council and supporting the establishment of the Abyei Police Service. The protection of civilians and promotion of rule of law must not suffer due to delays in political settlement. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank SG Martha Poby and Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, Guang Song, for their valuable contributions. In addition, I would like to thank the Secretary General for his report on UNESFA for the period of April-October 2025, and I welcome the permanent representatives of Sudan and South Sudan in this meeting today. Mr. President, Greece remains concerned by the continued lack of progress on the political track regarding the final status of Abyei. Amid the war in Sudan and political uncertainty in South Sudan, no meetings of the Joint Political and Security Mechanism and the Abyei Joint Oversight Committee were held during the reporting period. We call on all parties to urgently resume dialogue and reactivate this mechanism. Although the security situation in Abyei remains generally stable, it remains highly unpredictable. And there is no doubt the ongoing war in Sudan continues to directly affect both the security and humanitarian situation on the ground. Mr. President, allow me to highlight 3 key points. First, Greece strongly condemns the presence and actions of the Rapid Support Forces in Abyei. As highlighted also in the Secretary General's report, RSF elements continue to operate unlawfully in the area, establishing checkpoints, interfering with community structures, and exerting control. Their takeover of facilities, detention of officials, and attempts to assert authority are deeply alarming and violate the demilitarized status of Abyei under the 2011 agreement. We call for the immediate withdrawal of all RSF elements, the release of those arbitrarily detained, and full respect of Abyei's weapons-free and neutral character. Second, we underscore the importance of security guarantees and full freedom of movement for the joint border verification and monitoring mechanism, which is essential to prevent escalation along the porous frontier. The mechanism continues to face serious security constraints, including airspace closure, seizure of UN-contracted fuel trucks, patrol restrictions, and even firing incidents against UN aircraft, forcing a temporary reduction of UNESFA's presence in Kadugli and reliance on air resupply. Unhindered movement and the safety of mission personnel are vital to maintaining stability and upholding the demilitarized status of the Abyei area. Greece, therefore, echoes the Secretary General's call for all parties to support the joint border verification and monitoring mechanism, remove all obstacles to its operations, and uphold their commitments under the 2011 agreement. Third, turning to the humanitarian situation, the needs in Abyei remain severe. The Secretary General reports that more than 12,000 people displaced by the conflict in Sudan arrived during the reporting period, further straining limited services and heightening tensions. We are also deeply concerned by the cholera outbreak, with over 1,300 suspected cases, and by widespread child malnutrition. In this regard, Greece remains deeply concerned about the protection of children, including reported cases of sexual violence against minors, the presence of armed actors, the proliferation of small arms, and ongoing displacement further heighten their vulnerability. We underscore the need for accountability, strengthened child protection monitoring, and comprehensive survivor support. Protecting children must remain central to all our efforts, in line with international humanitarian and human rights law. Mr. President, we urge donors to sustain humanitarian funding and all actors to ensure unhindered access and preserve the civilian character of Abyei. A lasting peace will depend on concrete steps from the parties, full respect of existing agreements, and continued support for inclusive local peace efforts. Greece strongly supports UNESFA and calls for the deployment of the remaining authorized police units to strengthen rule of law and community protection. In view of the upcoming renewal of UNESFA's mandate, it is vital that the mission continues to provide security on the ground in order for the political track to advance. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of China.
President, I congratulate Sierra Leone on assuming the presidency of the Council this month. The Chinese delegation will fully cooperate with you and your team. I also congratulate Russia on successfully completing the presidency last month. I thank ASG, POBI, and Special Envoy Guang Cong for their briefings and welcome the participation of representatives of Sudan and South Sudan in today's meeting. At present, amid rising conflict in Sudan and its spillover effect and political uncertainty in South Sudan, the political process in Abyei and its peace and development face increased challenges.
中方建议国际社会从以下4个方面
recommends that the international community to support in the following four aspects. First of all, to advance the political process in the RBA area. Sudan and South Sudan are the parties involved. Their coordination and cooperation are required for the political solution. China welcomes the recent expression by both sides of a willingness to revitalize the political process. Currently, both Sudan and South Sudan face difficulties. The international community should respect the sovereignty and ownership of both countries, demonstrate sufficient inclusiveness and patience, encourage them to maintain the momentum of dialogue, and resume meetings of the joint political and security mechanism at a suitable moment to create favorable conditions for resolving the final status and border issues of RBA. The Security Council should avoid exerting undue pressure so as not to exacerbate conflicts and be counterproductive. China welcomes Special Envoy Mr. Cong Guang to coordinate with the AU and IGAD and other parties to resolve the issue of the RBA area. Secondly, to maintain security and stability in the RBA area, China welcomes the agreement reached between the Ngok Dinka and Miseria communities on herd migration, as well as improve the relationship between the Ngok Dinka and the Twik Dinka communities through cooperation. We support UNISFA in sustaining the momentum of intercommunal dialogue, urging all parties to break the cycle of violence, bridge differences, improve mutual trust for harmonious coexistence. Issues such as cross-border movement of armed personnel and proliferation of assault increase security risks in the area. China encourages Sudan and South Sudan to strengthen coordination and cooperation in jointly implementing the temporary agreement, and urges RSF and other parties to respect the demilitarized and weapons-free status of the area and maintain local peace and stability. Third, focus on addressing humanitarian and development issues. External conflicts have led to massive influx of the displaced and returnees into the area, exacerbating local humanitarian crisis. China commends the timely humanitarian response by UN agencies and calls on the international community to provide greater assistance and support. Resource scarcity and underdevelopment are root causes of the conflict in the area. China supports accelerating the implementation of joint program of the resident coordinators in Sudan and South Sudan in RBA, and supports UNISFA in carrying out a series of equips to help local communities improve their production and living conditions, enhance their capacity for self-reliance and sustainable development, and eliminate the breeding ground for conflicts. Fourth, support UNISFA in better delivering its mandates. China commends UNISFA's contributions to maintaining stability in RBA, easing intercommunal tensions, and promoting social development. Despite difficult circumstances, we encourage the governments of Sudan and South Sudan to provide maximum support and facilitation for the rotation of UNISFA personnel, logistical resupply, and the transportation of equipment and materials. China condemns the attack against the UNISFA helicopters and urges immediate return of assets belonging to UNISFA. UNISFA should strengthen security measures and enhance safety assessments to prevent further attacks on peacekeepers. President, the Security Council is currently consulting on UNISFA's mandate renewal. As one of the main TCCs to UNISFA, China fully supports the mission in focusing on its core mandate, delivering its mandate consistently and efficiently, and continuing to contribute to peace, stability, and lasting security in the area. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Felicito a la delegación
I would like to
de Rusia
congratulate the Russian presidency for their
Consejo de Seguridad
very good management of the Security Council last
a la
month.
vez que felicito a usted,
And I would also like to congratulate you, Mr. President, and Sierra Leone on assuming the presidency of the Council during this month of November, and I'm sure that your presidency will be successful, and we are always there to assist you. Panama thanks the Assistant Secretary General for Africa, Ms. Martha Poby, and the Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, Mr. Guan Kong, for their updates on the current situation in Abyei. Panama acknowledges the presence at this meeting of the representatives of Sudan and South Sudan, honoring us today with their presence. Abyei continues to be a place of central political and symbolic importance, central for peace between Sudan and South Sudan. The lack of resolution regarding its final status, as foreseen in the 2005 peace agreements and the 2011 temporary arrangements, keeps the region in a state of constant tension and prolongs uncertainty for its communities. Panama observes with concern the worsening security situation in Abyei. The recent report of the Secretary General documents a significant increase in security incidents and deaths compared to the previous period. This includes an increase in sporadic incidents involving firearms near installations of the United Nations Interim Security Force for Abyei, UNISFA. Recent clashes between armed groups have forced the evacuation of more than 100 civilians, mainly women and children, and have led to dozens of people seeking refuge within UNISFA facilities. These events reflect the grave risks faced by the civilian population and underscore the urgency of strengthening protection mechanisms and advancing effective political dialogue to prevent the escalation of violence. The situation in Sudan and the intercommunal dynamics in the region have heightened insecurity and criminality, creating additional risks for peacekeeping personnel. The presence of armed actors in violation of the demilitarized status of the area, which was established in 2011, continues to hinder the monitoring and protection work carried out by UNISFA and the Joint Border Verification and Monitoring Mechanism, and therefore this must cease immediately. Panama stresses the need to revitalize political dialogue on Abyei and border security in order to create safe conditions for the population and to move toward a lasting solution on the question of the final status. Likewise, it's essential that UNISFA have the full support, freedom of movement, and sufficient personnel to fulfill its mandate of protecting civilians and maintaining security. Otherwise, it will be impossible for UNISFA to fully implement its mandate. Panama urges all parties to fully respect the 2005 peace agreements and the 2011 temporary arrangements and reiterates the importance of ensuring the safety of all mission personnel. The international community must maintain coordinated action to ensure that UNISFA has the resources, cooperation, and political backing necessary to create the conditions for an effective political process leading to stability and the peaceful resolution of the region's persistent challenges. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank both briefers and commend UNISFA's personnel for the dedication under increasingly complex and unpredictable conditions. Mr. President, I wish to make the following 3 points. First, Abyei's fragile stability continues to erode under the weight of overlapping crises. The war in Sudan, instability in South Sudan, the lack of progress in Abyei's final status, the proliferation of state and non-state armed actors as well as weapons, and the growing impact of climate-related shocks, to name a few. The protracted political vacuum is untenable. Slovenia calls on Sudan and South Sudan to resume dialogue to resolve outstanding issues and ensure that Abyei remains a political priority. The increased presence of armed actors, the RSF in the north and the SSPDF and National Police in the south, constitutes a clear violation of the 2011 agreement and undermines Abiyeh's demilitarized and weapon-free status. All armed actors must withdraw immediately and unconditionally. We remain deeply concerned about the reported proliferation of small arms and light weapons fueling crime and intercommunal violence. Climate stress and resource scarcity further aggravate competition and displacement and must be addressed with a sense of urgency. Second, the humanitarian and human rights situation continues to deteriorate. Cholera outbreaks, food insecurity, and growing displacement continue to devastate communities, while cuts are forcing humanitarian partners to scale back critical services. We underscore humanitarian access must remain safe and unhindered, and humanitarian workers must be protected. We strongly condemn the human rights violations, including arbitrary arrests, enforced disappearances, and sexual violence. Likewise, we are gravely alarmed by the reports of sexual and gender-based violence, especially against minors. Survivors deserve justice and comprehensive support. Silence and impunity are not acceptable. Slovenia commends UNISFA's continued engagement with local leaders to promote reconciliation and coexistence between Angok Dinka, Miseria, and Twig Dinka communities. The mission's facilitation of joint peace committees, traditional leaders' dialogues, and women's and youth conferences remain vital in easing tensions and preventing escalation. We wish to stress that women's leadership and participation are central to local peace building. Third, UNISFA remains a vital stabilizing presence in an increasingly volatile region. Yet it continues to face serious constraints, restrictions on freedom of movement, repeated SOFA violations, and persistent obstruction, threats, and safety incidents against its personnel. Such actions are unacceptable. We call on all parties to fully respect their obligations under the SOFA and guarantee UNISFA's safe, unhindered access by air and land. The situation around the joint border verification and monitoring mechanism in Kadugli remains highly alarming. Insecurity and access restrictions continue to jeopardize its operations and the safety of the UN personnel. We call on parties to guarantee the safety and freedom of movement of all UN staff and create conditions for the mechanism's safe functioning. We commend UNISFA's continued mentoring of community protection committees and joint protection units, as well as training on detention practices, human rights, and early warning. Abiyeh needs functioning policing institutions. The establishment of the Abiyeh Police Service is essential to uphold law and order and protect civilians. Equally, the deployment of the authorized UN police officers and foreign police units is overdue. We call on parties to support pending deployments, including civilian deputy head of mission, without delay. Mr. President, Abiyeh cannot remain a forgotten flashpoint. A sustainable ceasefire in Sudan, political re-engagement by both countries, and implementation of the 2011 agreement are prerequisites for lasting stability. Until Abiyeh's final status is determined, UNISFA remains indispensable. Slovenia fully supports the renewal of UNISFA's mandate and underlines the mission's essential role in maintaining peace and security and protecting civilians in Abiyeh. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And I thank Assistant Secretary General Poby and Special Envoy Song for their briefings today. I will make 3 points. First, the United Kingdom reiterates its full support for UNISFA and its mandate. The Secretary General's report highlights the mission's ongoing critical role and efforts to prevent instability. This includes UNISFA's quick reaction forces and community peace initiatives, and the establishment of joint women's peace communities by local communities is particularly encouraging in this regard. However, it is regrettable that UNISFA continues to face serious constraints, including violations of the Status of Forces Agreement and restricted movement caused by the presence of South Sudanese forces and Rapid Support Forces fighters. We call on all armed groups to withdraw from Abyei, in line with the 2011 agreement that Abyei would be demilitarized and weapons-free. We further urge Sudan to issue visas for UNISFA police and civilian personnel without delay to enable the mission to address rising security and rule of law challenges. Second, the deteriorating humanitarian and security situation in Abyei is of grave concern. Growing arrivals of displaced people, many as a direct consequence of the conflict in Sudan, are increasing pressure on limited resources and straining intercommunal relations. The rising presence of armed actors, including South Sudan People's Defense Forces and the Rapid Support Forces, is unacceptable. This is having a significant impact on the safety of civilians, including the suspension of mine clearance operations due to local intimidation. We stress the need for safe and unhindered access to enable the protection of civilians. Third, we regret that there has been no progress in the political process between Sudan and South Sudan on the final status of Abyei and border issues. It is essential that both sides re-engage and take concrete steps towards resolving outstanding border issues, despite the conflict in Sudan and political uncertainty in South Sudan. Finally, it is clear that the implementation of UNISFA's mandate remains essential to maintain peace in this increasingly fragile region. The United Kingdom looks forward to engaging in constructive discussions in support of the renewal of the mission's mandate. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of France.
Monsieur le Président,
President,
d'abord remercier la sous-secrétaire
at the
générale pour
outset, I
l'Afrique,
would like to
Madame Martha Poby,
thank
ainsi
ASG
que
for
l'envoyé
Africa,
spécial
Ms.
pour la Corne de
Martha
l'Afrique,
Poby, as
M.
well as the
Guangchong,
Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa,
leurs
Mr.
interventions.
Guangchong. Thank you for your briefings.
Les interventions rappellent que la situation dans la
The
région d'Abyei
briefings served as a
reste
reminder
tendue.
that the situation in the Abyei region
du
remains
contexte
tense.
régional,
Given the regional context,
détérioration
we
ne peut
cannot
être
rule
exclue.
out further deterioration.
Dans ce contexte,
Against this
j'insisterai sur
backdrop,
3 points.
I would like to emphasize 3
Premièrement,
points. First,
La France
France
rappelle son plein
reiterates
soutien à la
its
force
unswerving
intérimaire des
support
Nations Unies
for
à
the
Abyei.
UN Interim Security
FISMA.
Force in Abyei,
Dans un
UNISFA.
environnement sécuritaire très
In
dégradé,
a highly
la mission
degraded
joue un
security
rôle
environment,
essentiel
the mission
pour
plays an
protéger les
essential
civils
role in
et
protecting
contribuer à la
civilians
stabilité.
and contributing to stability.
La situation humanitaire
The
reste
humanitarian
difficile,
situation
avec des
remains
violences
difficult.
intercommunautaires,
We're seeing intercommunal
une forte
violence,
insécurité alimentaire
acute
et
food
des
insecurity,
catastrophes climatiques.
and climate disasters.
La mission joue un rôle
The
important
mission hence
pour
plays
faciliter
an
le
important
travail
role
des
in
efforts
facilitating the work of humanitarian
La
actors.
France exprime son
France
plein
would
soutien
like
à
to
l'envoyé
express its
spécial pour la
support,
Corne de
full
l'Afrique,
support
M.
for the Special
Guangchong,
Envoy for the Horn
et
of
à ses efforts
Horn
de
of Africa,
médiation
Mr. Guangchong,
entre le Soudan
and his
et
efforts
le
to
Soudan du
mediate
Sud
between Sudan
pour
and
la
South
pleine mise en
Sudan
œuvre des
so as to
accords
fully
2011
implement
et de
the
2012
2011 and
sur
2012
l'administration
agreements
et la
on the
définition
administration
du statut
and
d'Abyei.
the determination of Abyei's final
Deuxièmement,
status.
la
Second,
France appelle
France
le
calls
Soudan
on
et le Soudan
Sudan
du Sud
and South
à
Sudan
permettre à la mission
to allow
de
the
fonctionner
mission to
pleinement.
function fully.
Nous appelons les
We
autorités
call
soudanaises
on
et
the
sud-soudanaises à
Sudanese
accorder
and
les visas
South
nécessaires
Sudanese
au déploiement des officiers de
authorities to grant
police,
the visas
des unités
necessary
de
for
police
the deployment
constituées,
of police
mandatées
officers,
et aux
the
personnels
mandated
humanitaires.
formed police units, and
Nous
humanitarian
réitérons
personnel.
nos appels
We
aux
reiterate
autorités
our calls
sud-soudanaises à
for
retirer les
the
forces de
authorities
défense
of
populaire
South Sudan
présentes dans la
to
zone en
withdraw South
contravention
Sudan's
du
People's
statut
Defense
démilitarisé
Forces,
d'Abyei.
the SSPDF,
Toutes les
which are
parties
present in
doivent
the
lever
area
les
in
entraves à la liberté
contravention
de
of
circulation de la
the
mission,
demilitarized
y
status
compris aux abords de la
of the
base de
area. All
Kadougli,
parties must
dont les
lift
accès doivent être
impediments
libres
to
et sécurisés.
the mission's freedom
La
of
France appelle à la
movement,
nomination
especially
rapide d'un
around
adjoint
team
civil
sites.
au chef de mission
France calls
afin
for
de
swift
faciliter les contacts
appointment
entre les
of a
parties.
civilian
Et elle
deputy
demande
head
à
of
ces
mission
dernières
so as
de
to
reprendre
facilitate
les
contacts
discussions
between
dans
the
le cadre des
parties.
mécanismes
We
conjoints
call on the
politiques
parties
et
to
sécuritaires.
resume
Troisièmement,
discussions on
le
the
cumul
joint
de
political and security
l'intensification de la
mechanism.
guerre au Soudan,
Third, the accumulation
en
of
particulier dans
the
les corps de
intensification of the war in the
et de
Sudan, in
l'instabilité au
particular in
Soudan
the
du
core
Sud,
defense
font peser
and
une
instability in
menace sur la
South
stabilité d'Abyei.
Sudan, pose a threat
La
on
France appelle au
Abyei's
retrait
stability.
immédiat
a threat to Abiyai's stability. France calls for the immediate withdrawal of the rapid support forces from Abyei. We condemn the threats they pose to UNISFA, in particular the abduction of mission personnel in February of this year. More broadly, we are concerned by the regional impact of the conflict in the Sudan and the risk of it spilling over to South Sudan. The parties to the conflict in the Sudan must undertake unconditional negotiations so as to sign a ceasefire to be followed by a credible political process. President, France remains determined to support the people of Sudan and South Sudan who are confronting a security, humanitarian, and economic crisis that is particularly intense. We are determined to contribute to the restoration of peace. I thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me also thank Assistant Secretary General Poby and Special Envoy Kong for their briefings. And particularly, we welcome Special Envoy Kong to the Chamber for his first briefing since his appointment, even virtually. Mr. President, allow me to make 3 points. First, UNISFA represents a critical pillar of security and stability in Abyei. Denmark expresses full support for continued fulfillment of the mission's mandate. Denmark strongly condemns any form of violence against UN troops, including the February 2025 incident by the Rapid Support Forces. We call for accountability under international humanitarian law. Denmark supports the urgent deployment of additional police personnel to ensure the mission can uphold rule of law and provide safety and security alongside its military units, especially in and around the Amiet market. In this regard, we call on the Sudanese and South Sudanese authorities to urgently grant all necessary visas to civilian and police personnel. Second, Mr. President, the humanitarian situation in Abyei remains concerning. The influx of refugees, returnees, and displaced people has led to a surge in demand for aid amid high levels of food insecurity and health challenges. Regrettably, at the same time, the provision and funding of this aid has declined. Climate change intersects with existing conflict dynamics by disrupting traditional mobility patterns for farmers and herders, impacting availability of water and grazing land. This intersection may heighten intercommunal violence and fuel ethnic tensions while contributing to the area's instability. Heavy rains and flooding may also limit UNISFA's capacity to conduct patrols and carry out its protection of civilian mandate, and we emphasize that the mission should be adequately resourced to strengthen operational effectiveness in Abyei. UNISFA's engagement through its Community Liaison Office plays an important role in promoting dialogue and meaningful inclusion of women and youth. Maintaining and strengthening the civilian components, particularly focused on gender, rule of law, and community outreach, is vital to ensure alignment between the mission's presence and needs of the local community. Third, Mr. President, Abyei is caught between crisis and conflict to the north and to the south. The ongoing war in Sudan profoundly impacts the region's stability, triggering large-scale displacement into Abyei while increasing security incidents. We renew our call for an urgent ceasefire in Sudan. Denmark remains concerned about the continuing presence of the Rapid Support Forces, the South Sudan People's Defense Forces, and other armed elements in Abyei. We strongly urge them to withdraw from the demilitarized zone. Sudan and South Sudan must respect the status of forces agreement, and we urge both sides to address issues related to the joint border verification and monitoring mechanism. In closing, the people of Abyei remain trapped in a complex emergency with spillovers from conflicts in neighboring areas, immense humanitarian needs, and threats of intercommunal violence. Denmark remains committed to supporting UNISFA's role in ensuring peace and stability in the area. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Sudan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me at the outset to extend to you and to your friendly country my sincere congratulations on assuming the presidency of the Security Council for the month of November. I wish you every success in leading the Council's work during this delicate period. I would also like to thank the Russian Federation for their enlightened conduct of the presidency last month. I'd like to thank Madam Martha Poby, Assistant Secretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, and Mr. Wang Kong, Special Envoy of the Secretary General for the Horn of Africa, for their briefings on the implementation of the United Nations Interim Security Force for Abyei UNISFA mandate. My delegation has reviewed the Secretary General's report S/2025/518 and the observations contained therein. Mr. President, Sudan reaffirms its full commitment to the political and legal references that govern the current situation in the Abyei area. These references constitute the legitimate framework guiding all efforts undertaken in the region. The presence of UNISFA is one of the clearest manifestations of these references. This includes the agreement on temporary administrative and security arrangements for Abyei, signed in June 2011, as well as the cooperation agreements between Sudan and South Sudan. These references stipulate the establishment of temporary structures and mechanisms, including the Joint Administration, Joint Legislative Council, and Joint Police Service of Abyei, pending a final settlement acceptable to both parties. One, with regard to the final status of Abyei, and that takes into account realities on the ground, reflects the aspirations of the local community, and that will guarantee peace, security, and social harmony in the long term. Sudan sees no alternative to strict adherence to these references and the implementation of their provisions, both in letter and in spirit. Sudan has repeatedly affirmed its full readiness to establish these temporary administrative and security mechanisms, including the formation of the Joint Police, Administration and Legislative Council. And we hope that our brothers in the Republic of South Sudan will respect the 2011 agreement provisions in the interests of the local population and of sustainable peace in the region. Mr. President, I'd like to address the four following points here. First, Sudan reiterates its commitment to preserving security and stability in Abyei, and we insist on the need to avoid any unilateral actions that could threaten that stability or complicate UNISFA's mission. We also stress the importance of keeping the area free of any armed presence north as well as south of the zero line, including the presence of the RSF. And we call upon the Secretariat of the United Nations and UNISFA to put an end to any unauthorized presence in the area of these armed groups. It's also essential that the rapid support forces be held responsible after the attacks against UNISFA. Secondly, the government of Sudan reaffirms its total commitment to implementing the 20 June 2011 agreement on the establishment of the temporary administrative and security mechanisms. We are also attached to border demarcation in accordance with agreed frameworks, and we reject any attempts to alter the demographic reality or unlawfully expand territorial control in the area. We reiterate that a just resolution of the Abyei issue can only be achieved through a bilateral agreement between the two states, one that enjoys the consent of local communities as well as stakeholders. Third, Sudan calls upon UNISFA to enhance its development programs, particularly those with quick impact results that have a direct contribution to community stability and improve livelihoods, particularly in the areas of education, health, and community security. We also urge the mission, in coordination with the UN country team and relevant humanitarian agencies in Sudan and South Sudan, to intensify efforts to address the humanitarian needs of displaced persons and repatriate them in the light of certain security developments in parts of Sudan. Fourth, UNISFA continues to play a pivotal role in maintaining peace and stability pending a final settlement. And we want to ensure that the mission is able to fully implement its mandate in line with relevant Security Council resolutions. In this regard, we welcome the renewal of the mandate and discussions underway and its support for the joint border verification and monitoring mechanism. This is vital for confidence building and strengthening cooperation between the two countries. We must maintain the headquarters in Kadugli so that the mission is able to fulfill its mandate, and we commit to lifting any obstacles that the mission may face in Kadugli. Mr. President, in conclusion, Sudan reiterates its commitment to work closely with the government of South Sudan to enhance the role of the Joint Political and Security Mechanism and the Abyei Joint Oversight Committee. And we hope that together we can activate all bilateral mechanisms provided for in the agreements between the two countries. Sudan firmly believes that a sustainable solution to the Abyei question can only be achieved through sincere dialogue and cooperation between the two nations, away from any escalation, in a way to bring lasting peace to the region. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Sudan for the statement, and now give the floor to the representative of South Sudan.
Mr. President, at the onset, allow me to congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the United Nations Security Council for the month of November. We assure you of our delegation's full support and cooperation. We also take this opportunity to thank the Russian Federation for their presidency of the United Nations Security Council for the month of October, which was very successful. As this council discusses the Secretary General's report on the situation in Abyei and the mandate of the United Nations Interim Force in Abyei, UNISFA, the government of the Republic of South Sudan wishes to express its appreciation for the vital role played by UNISFA in ensuring the security, protection, and the well-being of the people of Abyei. We value the genuine efforts aimed at improving the lives and livelihoods of our people in Abyei. We also welcome many elements of the Secretary General's report and the ongoing endeavors toward stability and security in Abyei. However, we must express concerns that some aspects of the report place emphasis on matters of a superficial nature rather than the core issues affecting the safety of civilians and the stability of the region. South Sudan has no intention to hinder or intervene in UNISFA's mandate. The presence of South Sudan Defense Forces, SSPDF, in South Sudan's territories is meant to protect civilians and discourage inter-rivalry among communities. We take note and appreciate the mention of improved relations between the communities neighboring Abyei, as reflected in the Secretary General's report. Without this presence, the situation would have deteriorated significantly. Mr. President, in regard to the allegations of SOFA violations, South Sudan feels that these are often generalized and lack specificity. Incidents of searches or delays in issuing tax exemptions should not be misinterpreted. Searches occur only when credible intelligence indicates misuse of mission assets. Administrative processing of tax exemptions is handled by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs with timeline driven by required documentation and geographical distance of Abyei from Juba. These should not be portrayed as intentional delays. Practical coordination is needed to meet procedural requirements without compromising controls. Finally, referencing South Sudan security forces' presence in South Sudan territories in areas such as Penyekang, as it came in the report, as if these areas fall within Abyei, is inaccurate and misleading to external audience. Such assertions appear to aim at equating lawful presence of South Sudanese forces within recognized South Sudan territory with activities of other non-state elements in or near other areas of Abyei. This mischaracterization must be addressed, as it risks implying South Sudan is acting outside the UNISFA mandate where it is not. The Security Council Resolution 1990 of 27 June 2011 establishing UNISFA is so explicit on the limitation of the mission's mandate to the Abyei area. Mr. President, in conclusion, South Sudan reiterates the importance of UNISFA in protecting civilians, supporting livelihoods, and reducing intercommunal tension in Abyei. We stress the need for the mission to remain well-resourced and focused on preventing violation rather than merely reporting its outcomes. We sincerely extend our gratitude to force contributing countries that constitute UNISFA. We are all in this for ensuring a stable and secure future for the people of Abyei. And we stand ready to work together to achieve this goal. And as we do so, let it not be mistaken. Abyei and its people has always remained and will continue to remain amongst the top tier of South Sudan's highest priority. This is an existential and a constant principle. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the representative of South Sudan for the statement. There are no more names inscribed in the list of speakers. I now invite Council members to informal consultations to continue our discussion on the subject. The meeting is adjourned.